The coffee grew cold as the billionaire gazed out at New York City from his skyscraper in Beverly Hills. What he didn't know was that on this very day, at his dream wedding, he would discover he had 3 children he'd never met. Can you imagine finding out you're the father of identical triplets on your wedding day? Where are you watching this video from? Leave it in the comments and don't miss this incredible story of revenge turned redemption. James Harrison contemplated the skyline from his top-floor office, his fingers drumming on the mahogany desk as he held the phone to his ear. At 35, Forbes magazine had named him one of the most successful entrepreneurs in New York. His angular face, framed by a perfectly trimmed beard, tightened slightly as he waited for his call to be answered. But what James didn't know was that this call would forever change the course of his life. The woman on the other end held a secret that would shatter all his plans for revenge and transform him into a man he never thought he could be. 3 little hearts beat somewhere in the city, carrying his blood, his eyes, unknowingly waiting for the moment that would reunite them with the father they never knew. This is the story of how a perfect plan to make a past love suffer became the most unexpected gift life could offer. A story where pride clashes with love, where past mistakes seek redemption, and where 3 innocent children hold the power to heal broken hearts thought lost forever. James Harrison adjusted his Italian tie while overlooking the Hudson Valley from the heights of his tech company. The reflection of the imposing glass skyscraper distorted in the artificial lake surrounding his corporate headquarters in the Bronx. At 35, he had built an empire from scratch, transforming a simple college idea into the most valuable company in Latin America. His brown eyes reflected determination as he dialed the number he'd memorized for 6 years. His heart pounded as he waited to hear that voice that had silently tormented him. Children's Hospital of New York, Dr. Garcia. The female voice on the other end momentarily paralyzed his thoughts. 6 years without hearing it, but he would recognize it among thousands. "Hope, it's James," he said, trying to keep his tone casual. "James Harrison." A long silence indicated that she remembered him perfectly. He could picture her face. Slightly raised eyebrows, pursed lips, that little furrow in her brow when something puzzled her. "Well, this is a surprise," Hope finally replied, her voice laced with caution. "It's been, 6 years?" 6 years, 2 months and 17 days, he specified, immediately regretting revealing that he'd counted every day. "Approximately." James walked to the window, observing Mount Rainier and Mount Hood in the distance. His reflection showed a successful man in a tailored suit, but his eyes betrayed a vulnerability no one else could see. "What do I owe this call to after all this time?" Hope asked directly. Alex took a deep breath before uttering the words he'd rehearsed for weeks. "I'm getting married in 3 weeks. I wanted to invite you personally." Another silence, this one even longer than the last. James could perfectly imagine Hope's expression. "You're inviting me to your wedding?" Her incredulous tone confirmed exactly what he expected. "That interesting." "Yes," James replied with feigned nonchalance. "Isabel and I want to gather all the important people in our lives. You were significant in my life." "I'm surprised by your invitation, but thanks," Hope replied after a pause. "I'll try to attend. I'll need 3 front-row seats." James frowned. 3 seats? For my companions. When he hung up, a strange feeling washed over him. The plan was perfect. Hope would see everything he'd accomplished without her. But something in her voice, that specificity about the seats, deeply unsettled him. Hope Garcia dropped the phone on her desk, as if it were burning. Her hands trembled slightly as she tried to process what had just happened. James Harrison, after 6 years of absolute silence, was inviting her to his wedding in the exclusive Pacific Palisades of Brentwood. The walls of her office at the Children's Hospital were decorated with colorful drawings made by her little patients. Papel picado piñatas adorned the shelves, and the aroma of café de olla wafted from the hospital cafeteria. On the shelf behind her desk sat several photo frames. 3 of them showed 3 identical 5-year-olds, with mischievous smiles and intense brown eyes, exactly the same eyes as James. "Dr. Garcia, your next patient is ready," the nurse interrupted, peeking through the door. "Thanks, Teresa. 1 minute, please," Hope replied, trying to regain her professional composure. She got up and approached the photographs, gently caressing the children's faces. Matthew, Diego, and Carlos, his triplets, the sons James didn't know existed. She vividly remembered the last time she'd tried to contact him. It was when the children were only 6 months old. She had written an email with attached photos and a detailed explanation, explaining that she had given birth at the New York General Hospital, that the babies were healthy, that they needed their father. The reply came quickly, but it wasn't what she expected. "Leave Mr. Harrison alone with these false paternity claims. He has moved on with his life, and any claim at this time would only damage his public image and the stability of the company. Do not contact again." Signed, Valentina Martinez, CEO. Hope opened her desk drawer and pulled out a yellow envelope. Inside was a 6-year-old ultrasound showing 3 tiny embryos. The last ultrasound before James disappeared from her life, absorbed by his burgeoning business empire. "Kids, you're going to meet someone very special," she murmured to herself, looking at the photos of her children playing in Central Park. "You're going to meet your dad." The sound of mariachis from the nearby plaza brought her back to the present. It was the season of patriotic holidays, and all of New York City was filled with tricolor colors and joy. Her children adored mariachis. While putting on her white coat, she made a decision. She would attend that wedding, but she wouldn't go alone. It was time for James Harrison to meet his children. If he was willing to invite her as a trophy of his success, he would have to be prepared for the consequences of their reunion. What Hope couldn't imagine was the chain of events her decision would unleash, and how the orderly life she had built for herself and her children was about to completely transform. Valentina Martinez watched James intently from across the conference table on the executive floor of the Empire State Building. At 55, she was still an imposing woman, her black hair pulled back in a severe bun, wearing an impeccable power suit. She had been the first person to believe in James's potential when he was just a tech student from Austin with a brilliant idea. "The launch of the new operating system must coincide with the merger announcement," Valentina pointed out, sliding a D. The document sat on James's desk. "The shareholders expect a significant media impact." James nodded absently. His mind was still on his conversation with Hope. There was something in her voice, a reservation he hadn't anticipated. After 6 years, he'd imagined detecting surprise, maybe envy or regret. "Alex?" Valentina insisted, furrowing her brow slightly. "Are you listening to me?" "Sorry, Valentina," he replied, refocusing. "I was thinking about the wedding. There are many details pending." Valentina narrowed her eyes, assessing his expression. "Did you invite Hope Garcia as you planned?" James was surprised. Even though Valentina knew practically every aspect of his life, he didn't remember mentioning his intention to invite Hope. "That's right. I just spoke with her," he confirmed, studying his mentor's reaction. A fleeting glint crossed Valentina's eyes before her face returned to its usual impassivity. "And she accepted the invitation?" she asked casually, though her fingers tightened imperceptibly on the folder she held. "She said she'd try to attend. She asked for 3 front-row seats." Valentina shifted in her seat with an unreadable expression. 3 seats? How specific!" James walked to the window overlooking Times Square, where Independence Day festivities were being prepared. American flags waved all over the plaza. "Did you know Hope has children?" he asked suddenly, turning to Valentina. His mentor's face paled slightly. "It's good that she rebuilt her life," she replied in a controlled voice. James approached Valentina's desk and noticed something that chilled him. Among the corporate documents, a corner of a yellow envelope protruded, an envelope with his name handwritten on it. "What's this?" he asked, picking up the envelope before Valentina could react. Opening it, he found 3 sonograms and a letter dated 6 years ago. "Dear James, I'm pregnant with triplets." "You—" James looked up at Valentina, betrayal etched on his face. "You intercepted everything." Valentina went pale. "I only wanted to protect you. Did you know about my children?" James's voice was barely a whisper, charged with contained fury. "Mum, why didn't Dad ever come before?" Matthew asked, intently studying the photograph Hope had just shown them. It was an image of James taken from the internet, featuring him on the cover of Forbes US. Hope crouched down to be at the level of her 3 sons in the living room of their modest home in the West Village. The walls were decorated with colorful papel picado and family photographs. The aroma of her mother Eleanor's mole poblano wafted from the kitchen. "Dad didn't know you existed, my love," Hope explained gently, choosing her words carefully. "Sometimes people take different paths in life, and he never had the chance to meet you." Diego, the most adventurous of the 3, hopped closer. "Is he like Iron Man?" he asked, his eyes shining with excitement. "Michael from my class says his dad works with computers that fly." "Not exactly," Hope laughed, "but he does work with very advanced technology." Carlos, the most sensitive, remained seated silently, hugging his toy guitar. "Will Dad love us?" he asked in a small voice. Hope felt her heart constrict. "That's impossible not to happen," she assured, kissing his forehead. "Nobody who knows you could fail to love you." At that moment, her mobile phone rang with an incoming call. Unknown number. With some apprehension, she answered. "Hope, we need to talk urgently." James's voice sounded tense, almost unrecognizable. "I know about the children." Hope felt the air leave her lungs. The kid stared at her with curiosity, noticing the shift in her expression. "How did you find out?" he finally asked, without trying to deny it. "I found an article mentioning you were the father of triplets. Then I confronted Valentina. She intercepted all your attempts to contact me. Letters, emails, messages, everything. I never knew you were pregnant. I never knew I had children." Hope closed her eyes, processing this revelation. For years, she'd assumed James had simply chosen to ignore her messages, that he'd decided his career was more important than the possibility of being a father. "You never knew," she murmured, more to herself than to him. "Never," James confirmed, his voice cracking slightly. "Hope, I swear to the Virgin Mary, I would never have ignored something like that. Regardless of how we ended, I would never have abandoned my children." The 3 children approached her, instinctively sensing something important was happening. "Who is he, Mum?" Matthew whispered. Hope looked at her 3 children, their identical eyes full of curiosity, and made a decision that would change their lives forever. "He's your dad," she replied softly. "And he wants to meet you." The children looked at each other with a mixture of wonder and excitement that only 5-year-olds can express with such purity. James stormed into Valentina's office like a hurricane off the Gulf. His brown eyes blazed with a fury she'd never seen in their years of working together. In his hands, he held the yellow folder he'd found, crammed with letters, ultrasounds, and photographs. "I found all the letters you hid," he shouted, throwing the contents onto the mahogany desk. 6 years of lies, Valentina. 6 years. Valentina paled, but maintained her executive composure. "James, calm down. I can explain." "Explain what?" James picked up one of the ultrasounds, where 3 tiny embryos were clearly visible. "Explain how you robbed me of the right to know my children? How you intercepted every letter, every call, every attempt Hope made to contact me. The company was more important," Valentina exploded, her mask of serenity finally falling. "You were too young. A paternity scandal would have sunk us when we needed investors most." James paced the office like a caged jaguar, looking at the photographs of 3 identical babies smiling at the camera. His children. The children he never knew he had. "I have children," he murmured, his voice breaking. "I have 3 children who have grown up thinking I abandoned them. I did what I thought was best for your future, Valentina insisted. For our future, look at everything we've built. At what cost? James turned to her, tears in his eyes. At the cost of missing their first steps, their first words, 6 years of life I can never get back? Valentina approached, attempting one last maneuver. James, think about it. Hope has moved on. She's with another man now, a doctor at the hospital. His name is Javier. The children already have a father figure. James felt a punch to the stomach. What are you saying? She's engaged, James. He asked her to marry him yesterday. It's too late. The silence that followed was deafening. James looked out the window towards the Empire State Building, a symbol of American freedom, and made the most difficult decision of his life. You're fired, Valentina. I want your resignation immediately. You can't be serious. The company will survive. He cut her off. But our professional relationship ends here. You have betrayed my trust in the worst possible way. Valentina stared at him in disbelief as James headed for the door. And I'm calling off the wedding. I can't start a marriage based on lies when I've just discovered the biggest lie of my life. James left the office, leaving Valentina alone with the weight of her decisions. Mariachi music from Times Square continued playing Las Mañanitas, oblivious to the drama unfolding high above the city. The Washington Square Park Café in Greenwich Village retained its colonial charm. The walls were adorned with decorative tiles, while the aroma of Café de Olla mingled with the distant sound of mariachis in the palace. Hope arrived 5 minutes early, choosing a secluded table by the window overlooking the Metropolitan Museum of Art. She wore a simple blue dress that contrasted with her olive skin and highlighted her brown hair. She'd hesitated for a long time in front of her bedroom mirror, berating herself for caring so much about her appearance for a meeting that was supposed to be strictly professional. James arrived on time, striding through the cafe door with purpose. Despite the years that had passed, Hope felt a pang in her stomach. He was still attractive, but she noticed subtle differences, fine lines around his eyes, a more mature bearing. "Hi, Hope," he greeted her, his voice attempting calm, though his eyes betrayed nervousness. "James," she replied, offering a tight smile. He sat across from her, placing a leather portfolio on the wooden table. A waitress approached to take their order. Hope ordered Café de Olla, while James requested a black coffee, no sugar. "I never knew, Hope. If I had known," James began, breaking the uncomfortable silence. "Really?" she responded sharply. "Or you just didn't want to know?" "Because I did try to contact you, James, many times." James pulled out his phone and showed her pictures of all the letters he'd found in Valentina's office. They were all here. Every letter, every ultrasound, every attempt you made to contact me. Valentina intercepted them. Hope felt her initial resentment soften at the evident pain in his eyes. 6 years believing you didn't care about us. "Never," James vehemently denied. "I swear on everything that if I had known—" A mariachi from the street began playing Kiss Me More, momentarily interrupting their conversation. "Javier asked me to marry him yesterday," Hope blurted out suddenly, like ripping off a bandage. James felt the world crumble around him. The coffee that had just arrived grew cold in his hands. You're engaged? The kids adore him," Hope continued, watching his reaction. "He's a good man, James. A pediatrician like me. He understands my world, my work, my priorities." "And your answer?" he asked in a barely audible voice. Hope looked down at her steaming cup. "I haven't answered yet." Central Park shimmered under the morning sun. Entire families occupied the playgrounds while street vendors offered corn on the cob, esquites, and tamarind drinks. James had arrived half an hour early, too nervous to wait in his Beverly Hills penthouse. He was dressed casually but elegantly. Dark jeans, a light blue shirt, and sneakers. He had deliberated at length over his outfit, wanting to project a relaxed but respectable image. Not the CEO of a tech multinational, but simply a father about to meet his children. That's when he saw them. Hope was walking down the main gravel path, holding a child's hand on either side. The third child walked slightly ahead, curiously observing a squirrel climbing a centuries-old tree. James froze. From that distance, the resemblance was undeniable. Three small versions of himself, with the same slightly wavy dark hair, the same athletic build, even the same way of walking that he had at that age. "Good morning," Hope greeted with an encouraging smile as they approached. "We arrived just in time," James nodded, momentarily speechless. He finally knelt down to be at the children's level. "Hi," he said softly. "My name is James." "It's a pleasure to meet you." The serious-looking boy stepped forward. "I'm Matthew," he introduced himself formally, extending his small hand. "I'm 5 years and 4 months old." James shook the offered hand, marveled by the formality of the gesture. The second boy, the one with a mischievous smile, stepped forward without waiting for an invitation. "I'm Diego," he exclaimed enthusiastically. "You have the same eyes as us." Mom was right. The third boy remained next to Hope, observing the exchange with attentive eyes. "You must be Carlos," James guessed, addressing him with particular gentleness. The boy nodded without speaking, but held his gaze with an intensity surprising for someone so small. An expectant silence settled among them. It was Carlos who broke it with a question that broke James's heart in two. "Are you going to stay this time, Dad?" James felt tears threatening to well up. "Yes, my boy. This time, I'm going to stay." Matthew, always the most analytical, observed him intently. "Mom cries at night," he said with the brutal honesty of a 5-year-old. "Is it because of you, Dad?" James looked at Hope, who had paled at her son's revelation. His heart ached, knowing the unintentional pain he had caused. "No more tears," James promised, extending his arms. "Dad's here now." The 3 boys ran to him simultaneously, hugging him with a force he didn't expect from such small bodies. James hugged them back, inhaling the scent of baby shampoo and sun in their hair. For the first time in 6 years, he felt complete. The tension in the small West Village house was palpable when Javier arrived that night. He had called earlier, but his voice sounded different, more serious. Hope received him in the living room, while the children slept in their bedroom, exhausted after the encounter with James. "How was it?" Javier asked bluntly, taking a seat on the hand-embroidered Mexican fabric sofa. "Good," Hope replied, but her voice didn't sound convincing even to herself. Javier studied her intently. He knew every gesture of her face after months of their relationship. "The reunion, and you changed, Hope. Do you still love him?" "I only think about the children," she denied, avoiding his gaze. "That doesn't answer my question." The sound of the front door opening interrupted the conversation. James appeared in the doorway, breathing heavily, as if he had run from his car. "Hope, call off the wedding," he announced without preamble. "I resigned from the CEO position. I want to be a full-time father." Javier slowly stood up, sizing up the man who had just burst into their lives. "And who are you to come here after 6 years and change everything?" "I am the father of their children," James replied firmly, but without hostility. "And I'm the one who has been here when they needed a father figure," Javier countered. Hope stepped between the 2 men. "Enough! The children are sleeping!" Javier turned to her with pain in his eyes. "What do you choose, Hope? The past or the future? Because you can't have both." James stepped forward. "I'm not here to take anything from you, Doctor. I'm here to claim what's rightfully mine, but also to thank you for taking care of them when I wasn't there." "I didn't know," Javier began, confused. "That they existed," James finished. "It's true. But now I know, and I'm not going to lose them again." Hope looked at both of them, feeling the weight of a decision that would change the course of many lives. In her heart, she knew that despite the years, despite the pain, despite Javier being an extraordinary man, there was something she had never been able to forget. "Javier," she finally said softly, "you're a wonderful man, but he's the father of your children," Javier finished with a sad smile, "and the love of your life." James looked at Hope with restrained hope. waiting for her answer to a question that nobody had asked, but everyone understood. The future of an entire family hung on her next words. The Empire State Building shone under the midday sun when James arrived with the triplets holding their hands. The employees were speechless to see the CEO walking down the halls with 3 identical children who were clearly his sons. "Dad, your office is bigger than our house," Diego exclaimed, his eyes wide, contemplating the view of New York City from the 40th floor. "Are we rich?" Matthew asked with his usual analytical precision. James knelt down to his height. "We're rich in love, son. That's all that matters." Carlos timidly approached the grand piano that James had in a corner of his office. "Can I play it, Dad?" "Of course, champ." Carlos's small hands began to play a simple but beautiful melody, filling the executive office with a sweetness that contrasted with the usual business meetings. Michael, the CFO and old friend of James, entered the office and smiled at the scene. "So these are the famous heirs to the tech empire." "Dad, what does heirs mean?" Matthew asked. Before James could answer, the door burst open. Valentina stormed in with a distraught face and several reporters behind her. "You can't destroy everything for a few kids," she shouted, pointing to the triplets. "I thought you'd understand reason." The children stood motionless, feeling the tension in the air. Matthew, always protective, stood in front of his brothers. "Why didn't that lady want us to exist?" he asked with the devastating innocence of a child. James stepped between Valentina and his sons. "Because some people don't understand that love is more important than money." "James, think about the shareholders, about everything we've built," Valentina pleaded. "I have thought," he replied calmly, "and I'll build something better, a family." The reporters began taking photographs and shouting questions. Diego got scared and started to cry. Carlos stopped playing the piano and ran to James. "Dad, I'm scared," Carlos whispered, hugging his legs. James hugged all 3 of them, shielding them from the cameras. "Michael, get these reporters out of here, now!" While Michael handled the situation, James carried Carlos in his arms. "Don't worry, kids. Dad will always protect you." "Are we going home?" Diego asked, still with tears in his eyes. "Yes, let's go to Mom's. But first," James looked at Valentina with determination. "First, we're going to do something very special." He took his phone and dialed Hope's number. "Love, organize a party. It's time for the whole family to celebrate." The triplets smiled, not fully understanding what was happening, but sensing that something wonderful was about to happen. Chapter 10. Hope's garden had been transformed into a real American party. Red, white, and blue streamers hung between the jacaranda trees, while the mariachi band, the 3 sons, played My Little Chickadee from a corner of the yard. The aroma of red chili and Oaxaca tamales wafted from the kitchen, where Esperanza's mom, Eleanor, directed the preparations. The triplets raced around the backyard with their new cousins, Esperanza's siblings' children, while the adults chatted around tables decorated with marigolds and votive candles. James approached Esperanza, who watched the scene with a smile she hadn't worn in years. She was radiant in a hand-embroidered traditional Oaxacan dress. "I never thought I'd see you so happy again," James said, offering her a cup of pineapple punch. "The kids needed this," she replied. "They needed to feel part of a real family." The mariachi band began playing Las Mañanitas, and the guests gathered in a circle. James took the microphone offered by the lead singer. "Family," he began, his voice thick with emotion. "I've brought everyone here because I want to ask Esperanza something very important." The triplets ran to the center of the circle, sensing something special was about to happen. Esperanza felt nervous, thinking James would propose in front of everyone. "I don't want to marry you, Esperanza," James said, eliciting gasps of surprise from the guests. Esperanza was confused, feeling the heat rise to her cheeks. "I want something better," James continued, kneeling but not with a ring, instead taking the hands of the 3 children. "I want us to build the family we should have always been. No contracts, no papers, no pressure, just pure love." Matthew, Diego, and Carlos shouted in unison, Yes! A real family. Tears streamed down Esperanza's face as the mariachi band began playing Amor Eterno. James leaned in, gently wiping away her tears. "We don't need a perfect wedding in Pacific Palisades," he whispered. "We need this. Sundays with chili, mariachis on Fridays, nights helping with homework, a real life with real love." Esperanza looked at her children, who gazed at her with hope in their identical eyes. She looked at James, the man she'd loved since college, and who had finally found his way back home. "Yes, James," she replied, her voice choked with emotion. "Let's be a family." The three children pounced on their parents, creating a group hug as the mariachis played and the guests applauded. Eleanor dabbed her eyes with her apron as she watched her daughter find the happiness she'd always deserved. Revenge had become redemption. The perfect plan had transformed into life's most imperfect and beautiful gift. A new family story had just begun in the heart of New York.